I was sitting on the edge of our velvet sofa, the sunlight slipping through the blinds and painting stripes across my silk maternity blouse. 8 months along, my stomach already a small, insistent globe, I felt every thump of the baby inside. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, 3 missed calls from him. My husband. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, a cocktail of dread and resentment tightening my chest. The memory hit me like a slap I'd tried to forget. The day at my mother-in-law's house, her stern voice cutting through the air. "Why are you sitting?" My mum standing, and him, grabbing me without a thought, dragging me upright like I weighed nothing. I had been humiliated, small, and furious all at once. Even now, the echo made my palms sweat. I glanced around our modern apartment, polished floors, framed abstract art, the scent of fresh coffee lingering from this morning, and wondered how I ended up here. I looked calm, composed. Everyone who saw me would assume my life was smooth, predictable, perfect. But the truth was heavier, layered with moments I hadn't shared with anyone. Resilience built quietly over the years, like the secret muscles you only notice when you test them. The phone buzzed again. This time, I answered. His voice came through, warm, too casual, as if nothing had happened. But I wasn't the same girl anymore. 8 months pregnant, yes, but also strong, aware, and quietly defiant. Something in me shifted that day, and I could feel it simmering beneath the surface. It had been years since he grabbed me, but the memory demanded I confront it. And I was ready. I can still remember the smell of my mother-in-law's living room, the sharp scent of polish mixed with floral air freshener, an aroma that once felt suffocating. I was 26, 8 months pregnant, and filled with hope that maybe, just maybe, my husband and I could navigate this delicate balance of family expectations and our own lives. But that hope shattered in the blink of an eye. It started innocently enough. I had sat down to rest, my swollen feet aching, my back screaming for support. But the moment she walked into the room, her gaze fixed on me like I'd committed an unforgivable offense. "Why are you sitting?" "My mum's standing," she barked. I froze. My heart lurched in my chest, every nerve screaming humiliation. And then he did it. My husband, the man who promised he'd protect me, grabbed my arm and yanked me upright, as if my body wasn't my own. My hands trembled, the room spinning. The lump in my throat wouldn't let me speak, and shame pricked at my skin like needles. I remember gripping the edge of the couch, knuckles white, wishing I could disappear into the fabric. The embarrassment wasn't just for me. It felt like a betrayal of everything I'd believed in, everything I deserved. I wanted to scream, to tell him, "I am not your child to command, not your property to move at will," but no words came. It was then that my grandmother's words echoed in my mind, a soft, defiant whisper I hadn't heard in years. "Never let anyone decide your worth for you. Stand even when it's hard. Stand even if you are trembling." Her gift to me had been a small gold locket, worn and scratched, but inside it was a tiny piece of paper with that single line of advice. I had clutched it that day like a lifeline, feeling the strength of generations behind me. And something shifted. I looked at him, at my mother-in-law, and though my body shook, my mind crystallized. I would not let this moment define me. I would not let their expectations crush my spirit. That day, as I walked out of the room with slow, deliberate steps, I made a promise to myself. I would carve a life where no one had the power to make me feel small again. I would stand, figuratively and literally, on my own terms. Walking out of that living room didn't just mean leaving a moment behind. It meant leaving a life I had thought I'd always follow. I rented a small studio apartment downtown, the walls bare, the space echoing with both loneliness and possibility. I had nothing but my grandmother's locket, my baby growing inside me, and a flicker of stubborn determination that refused to be extinguished. I started small, taking freelance graphic design projects while my pregnancy progressed. Late nights blurred into early mornings, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting off my tired eyes as I learned, stumbled, and tried again. There were days when exhaustion pressed so hard on my chest I thought I would collapse, but each completed project became a tiny victory, a reminder that I could create my own path. Then I met Elise, a seasoned designer in her 40s, sharp, unflinching, and brilliant. She saw potential in my work I hadn't yet recognized myself. "You're not just talented," she said over coffee one rainy afternoon. "You have the kind of vision that people pay for, but they also respect." Her words were like oxygen. I began to take on bigger clients, pitching ideas I had once believed were too ambitious for someone like me. Each contract was a small rebellion against the girl who had been told to sit down and stay in her place. I became a master of secrecy. Family calls were brief, polite, always avoiding any mention of my growing freelance success. Social media was curated, showing only generic snapshots, a latte here, a sunset there. No one needed to know the truth of the hours I spent negotiating contracts, redesigning websites, or building a portfolio that was slowly becoming a recognizable brand. My husband had thought he could keep me small, but in the quiet of my apartment, I was growing unstoppable. The first major breakthrough came 6 months postpartum. A tech startup reached out, needing a full branding overhaul. I delivered beyond their expectations. The email congratulating me on a successful campaign, signed by the CEO, felt like a secret victory I carried in my heart. I remember holding my newborn daughter close, whispering, "We did it, baby. We're standing now." Soon, I had my own steady stream of clients, enough to consider hiring an assistant. I took courses in business management, financial planning, and digital marketing, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Every skill I learned, every decision I made, was another layer of armor against the world that once tried to make me feel small. By the time my husband and family thought I was still struggling, tired, dependent, unremarkable, I had quietly built a life that was entirely my own. I had standing. I had power. And most importantly, I had the unshakable belief that no one could ever make me feel inferior again. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror, noticing the faint lines under my eyes, the confidence in my stance, and whispered softly, "You've come so far, and this is only the beginning." It was a crisp Saturday morning when they arrived. My husband, my mother-in-law, and a few relatives, all under the pretense of checking in on me and the baby. They expected the same tired, frazzled woman they had seen last at family gatherings, the girl who had been commanded to stand, the one who supposedly couldn't manage life without them. I opened the door with a calm smile, my hand resting lightly on the polished wood frame of the doorway. "Hi," I said warmly, though my chest thrummed with anticipation. They stepped in, taking in the apartment, and I watched their expressions shift subtly as their eyes traced the details. My carefully arranged living room with contemporary art that wasn't just decorative but had been commissioned, the clean lines of the furniture, and the subtle elegance of personal touches, a gallery of my baby's artwork mixed with framed accomplishments. They paused in the kitchen, glancing at the sleek countertop, the high-end appliances, and the bouquet of fresh flowers I had arranged myself. I let the silence stretch, letting them absorb the reality that the woman they had dismissed as fragile and dependent was anything but. Finally, my mother-in-law's voice broke through, a little sharp, a little incredulous. You've done all this?" Her eyes lingered on the designer rug, the modern shelving, the certificates and awards I had displayed modestly. "Yes," I replied evenly. "All of this and more." My hands rested lightly on my growing belly, a subtle reminder of the life I was nurturing and the strength I carried within me. My husband opened his mouth, faltering, searching for the words to justify himself. I watched the familiar arrogance drain from his posture, replaced by something that resembled disbelief. I thought," he stammered, and then stopped, realizing there was nothing left to say. I stepped into the center of the room, letting my presence fill the space. "You thought I was helpless, that I would sit, small and quiet, letting life happen around me. But life doesn't happen to me anymore. I make it happen." I let each word land with precision, calm but firm, like a drumbeat of truth. I reached for my laptop and opened it, showing them the email threads, contracts, client lists, and design projects I had successfully managed on my own. "This," I said, sweeping a hand over the screen, "is my work, my business, my independence. I didn't need your approval. I didn't need anyone to tell me my worth." The silence that followed was electric. My mother-in-law's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. My husband's face shifted from shock to guilt, the kind that comes when you realize you've underestimated someone you thought you controlled. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "I am standing now," I said softly but clearly, "because I chose to, not because anyone forced me to. And nothing you say or do can change that." For a long moment, they simply absorbed it. The confident, accomplished woman before them was not the fragile, obedient girl they remembered. The transformation was undeniable, and they could see it. Her strength, her independence, her power, shining in every detail of her life, every subtle gesture, and every quiet victory she had built. I let the silence stretch a little longer, watching their eyes dart from the laptop to me, trying to comprehend that the woman they had once dismissed now held the reins of her own life. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I was no longer the fragile, 8 months pregnant girl they had pushed around. I was a mother, a professional, a force they could neither undermine nor ignore. I took a deep breath, feeling the baby move against my hand, a subtle reminder of my strength and responsibility. "I'm willing to engage," I said, my voice steady and calm, "but on my terms." Their expressions flickered: uncertainty, curiosity, a hint of fear. First, to my husband. "You will respect boundaries," I said. "No more grabbing, no more controlling behavior, and no more assumptions about what I can or cannot do. If you want to be part of our child's life, it must be as an equal, not as someone who dictates terms. You need to unlearn the arrogance that almost broke us." His jaw tightened, but I could see the first glimmers of understanding. I hear you," he murmured, though the words lacked the full weight of the promise. Then my mother-in-law. "You must stop assuming your way is the only way," I told her. "Your opinions are valid, but your control over me is not. I expect respect, acknowledgement of my choices, and support when it matters, not interference." Her lips pressed together, the tightness in her expression betraying the conflict between ego and recognition. To the rest of the family, I laid out conditions with the same calm clarity: support my choices without judgment, treat my daughter as a person, not a possession, and demonstrate growth in emotional intelligence, patience, and understanding. Each condition was rooted not in revenge, but in the emotional healing I had fought so hard to secure for myself and my child. I could feel the tension in the room, a storm shifting to a calm sea. I mixed firmness with compassion, letting them know that my decisions were not punishment. They were lessons in respect and boundaries. "I care about you," I said, "but I will not bend to old patterns that have caused harm. This is how we move forward, together, but differently." By the time I finished, I could see the subtle changes: my husband's eyes softening, the rigid posture of my mother-in-law easing, the relatives quietly nodding in acknowledgement. They realized that power was no longer a weapon to use against me. It was a space I had claimed for myself, and they would either meet me there or remain on the sidelines. I felt a quiet satisfaction, a subtle but profound sense of liberation. For years, I had endured humiliation, control, and judgment, but I had transformed those experiences into strength. Now, I wasn't just standing. I was defining the terms of every interaction, every relationship, every moment that mattered. I was no longer reacting. I was shaping my world. Weeks passed, and subtle changes began to unfold. My husband no longer assumed authority over me. Instead, he asked, listened, and learned. It was awkward at first, the kind of tentative respect that comes from realizing you can't dominate someone who refuses to be diminished. But over time, I saw glimpses of genuine effort, a willingness to meet me halfway and participate in our child's life as a partner rather than a commander. My mother-in-law softened too. She began asking for my advice instead of insisting on her own, and I responded with measured kindness, reinforcing that respect could be reciprocal. Even distant relatives started to adjust, noticing the quiet authority I now carried, the way I held space for myself and others without aggression or apology. The transformation wasn't overnight, but it was steady, deliberate, and deeply satisfying. One evening, I held my daughter close, the golden locket my grandmother had given me resting against my chest. I traced the delicate chain with my finger, thinking of her words, "Stand even when it's hard. Stand even if you are trembling." That single piece of advice had carried me through humiliation, isolation, and fear. Now it anchored me in pride, independence, and clarity. I reflected on the journey, the anger, the tears, the nights I cried into pillows while wondering if I could endure another day. Every struggle had carved the woman I had become, resilient, assertive, and unafraid of claiming her worth. I realized that the relationships I valued now weren't built on fear, obedience, or expectation. They were built on mutual respect, understanding, and growth. Looking out the window at the city lights flickering against the evening sky, I felt a quiet smile spread across my face. My life was no longer defined by what others expected of me, but by the strength I had discovered within myself. I was a mother, a creator, a woman who had weathered storms and emerged not just intact but radiant with possibility. I whispered softly, almost to myself, as my daughter's breathing slowed in sleep. "We're standing now, strong, fearless, and unshakable." And in that moment, I knew that I had finally claimed my own space in the world, fully, unapologetically, and with the grace of someone who had truly earned it.